All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson podcast. The Carl Jackson Show podcast. Listen, guys, I want to give you a big thank you for all of you that are tuning in today. Today is our 100th episode, and the downloads have been exploding. So I want to take the time to thank you for tuning in to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I appreciate your participation. Listen, we're in the fight together to make America great again. And so I could not do it without you. We are walking hand in hand to bust up tyranny in America. Thank God for all of you. Listen, I got several things that I want to talk to you about today. We will talk about a little bit about the economy. I want to focus in on EVs, something that I think is really important. I think one of the most dangerous things, or three of the most dangerous things that the left is pushing in order to destroy freedom in America is healthcare issues, whether you consider the healthcare lockdown, so on, et cetera. Energy issues, which I'll speak about. Joe Biden had something to say about that, in identity politics. If we can destroy that three-legged stool, snake, whatever you want to call it, I think that we can save America. So today I want to talk about the second one, which is energy, but I am going to bring you some of the latest news today. So stay tuned.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. Guys, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Go to thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, or anywhere that you find your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please subscribe, like, share, review. That'll help our numbers grow. We're in this fight together for freedom, so I would appreciate your help. And also, anywhere that I am on social media, you can find me at The Carl Jackson Show. That's The Carl Jackson Show, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, True Social, Twitter, you name it. Carl Jackson Show, The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me, and I appreciate that. Guys, how many child slaves does it take to make an EV? Interesting question, I hope. That is basically the title of this podcast for today. And I want to get into this. You're going to be well informed on the issue of EV, the virtue signaling of EVs, which is absolutely destroying the planet. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, there are a couple of news stories that I really want to get into today. And guys, I'm not going to dive into, at least not today, into the issue that's occurring with Uvalde, as more news continues to leak out of the absolute debacle that appears to be the Uvalde Police Department. No doubt that heads have to roll. A very, very disturbing and sad situation. My heart completely goes out to those parents that lost their children unnecessarily. So, having said that, we have some GOP sellouts, apparently, that are working on a bipartisan bill still. They seem to have ironed out things. I'm actually going to talk about that tomorrow, along with why we need to talk about the 17th Amendment and removing that. And I think that'll solve a lot of the elitism that we see in Washington, D.C., even amongst Republicans. Remember, Republicans are not necessarily our friends, despite the fact that I am a conservative that votes Republican, no doubt about it. I try my best to stay clear of the weak, moderate Republicans if I can help it. So we're going to talk about that in the 17th Amendment tomorrow. But there are a couple of good stories that I really want to talk about, share, that was on the tip sheet for today. Supreme Court rules Maine state tuition funding cannot exclude religious schools. This is a big deal. This, according to Axios, the Supreme Court on Tuesday ruled that Maine cannot exclude religious schools from a state tuition aid program, saying that doing so violates the First Amendment. In a 6-3 opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts, he finally did something good, wrote, and actually this is the frustrating thing about John Roberts. He knows how he should vote in order to withhold the Constitution. Sometimes he just doesn't, and he plays politics when he says he's trying to avoid playing politics. But going back to this story, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that Maine's program operates to identify and exclude otherwise eligible schools on the basis of their religious exercise. The program allows parents who live in areas without public high schools to receive state assistance to cover tuition costs at public or private schools in other communities, as long as they are considered non-sectarian. All right, so here's the deal. This is a win for the First Amendment. This is a win. There is no separation of church and state. That is only an interpretation of people people that haven't read the Constitution or hate the Constitution. They try to that's only a slogan, right? That's a moniker of some sort that someone made up, but that doesn't exist. So that's why this is good news for those of you, even if you aren't religious. The First Amendment is making a comeback. That's good news. Now, I want to talk about this headline in order to segue into what I'm going to be talking about today, and that is Biden unremorseful about high gas prices, and he pushes clean energy. Guys, I'm getting ready to bust this nonsense up. We're getting ready to debunk this after today's show. You will be very well informed about the fallacy, the falsehood, the lie that is EVs are actually keeping the environment clean. Actually, there's a lot to this, so you're going to want to stay tuned. You're going to want to write notes, perhaps. There's also some child slave labor involved, and I've talked about this before. I've talked about it on Dennis Prager's shows and other national hosts, sitting in for Larry Elder. At the time, I've talked about this plenty, but I want to give you some great detail and specificity so that you can combat the left on this nonsense. I don't care if people buy EVs, but please don't tell me that they're good for the environment, because it is the complete opposite. And I will get into the numbers. But going back to the headline, this from Fox News, President Biden faced backlash after appearing to suggest that high gas prices will be a, quote, good, close quote, opportunity to make a fundamental turn to, and I'm quoting, clean energy. All right. So some conservatives called the president out on Twitter for the comments as gas prices average $4.98 a gallon nationwide, according to AAA, and inflation rose to a 40-year high last month, sparking fears of an impending recession. Biden's comments sparked backlash from many conservatives, with some critiquing Biden as being tone deaf to the problems average Americans are facing. Listen, elites are tone deaf because they don't care about you. And whether the elites exist in the Democrat Party when it comes to being unremorseful about high gas prices, or when it comes to the elites in the Republican Party that are willing to take away our Second Amendment rights or undermine our Second Amendment rights, these people simply don't care. These people think they're in charge. These people think they have the power to rule you. You are, or we are, right? We're not citizens, we're serfs. We should answer to them instead of vice versa. Well, listen, as an average everyday American, at least for now, right? I'm going to continue in this fight to keep the middle class, or to make the middle class great again in America. That is one of my missions, as well as to always bring you your daily dose of objective truth in a world of lies. Extremely important. All right, so now let me just share something that's very interesting to you. Now, United States, we were the big dog, right? And we shouldn't be ashamed about that. Our founding fathers, yes, we went through a lot of struggles. We went through a lot of turmoil, no doubt about it, just like every nation has. But because we're an open, or at least we were, an open and free society, we have so much information that we're allowed to consume, so we can look at America's history and we can bash it and we can do all this kind of stuff. A lot of other nations aren't free to do that because they don't have a First Amendment. Look at Canada even. Our neighbor, they don't even have a First Amendment. They don't have First Amendment rights there. So I found this article interesting. Zero Hedge, mapping the migration of the world's millionaires throughout 2022, the column says. A projected 88,000 millionaires will move to a new country, according to the latest Henley Global Citizens Report. Which countries are these millionaires moving to, and where in the world are they coming from? All right, so the vast majority of the people were moving from places like, obviously, Russia, Ukraine. China is another one. China is losing many of their millionaires. But I think this tells the story. Where are they going to? Well, according to the Henley Global Citizens Report, There are several places that they are going to. They give different years or what have you, but I'm just going to concentrate on this year ending in 2022, 2021 to 2022 now. Okay, now I can't find the exact globe that. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's where the rich are moving to. You'll be surprised. Some of these surprise me. All right, so they're moving to the UAE. That's number one. So millionaires from Russia, China, Ukraine, those are the people that are experiencing the biggest losses when it comes to their millionaires. They're moving. UAE is number one. Australia is number two at 3,500. UAE has 4,000. Singapore, 2,800. Israel has 2,500 millionaires that have moved there. The USA, we rank at number 5 at 1,500. Portugal is close to us at 1,300 millionaires that have moved there. Greece stands at 1,200. Canada at 1,000, and New Zealand 800. Now that's not total all the numbers, but that's where the vast majority of them have been moving to escape lives of hell in some of these countries that do exist. But I found it fascinating that America isn't the number one destination. Though it is the number one destination for illegal immigrants, they don't seem to be flocking to these people, these other countries, possibly because these other countries, industrialized nations, aren't as dumb as us to open up their borders. So perhaps that is why the illegal immigrants are flocking here. Now, having said that, I don't want to stay on this too long. This hat tip the Federalist. Germany's green energy disaster is a warning to the United States. So what I'm doing is I'm making the case, right? So the Biden administration, basically, they're up on high gas prices. They think it's a good thing because we get to transition to what they call clean energy, even though I'm going to show you why there is no such thing when it comes to clean energy. The goal is to control all of us. The goal is to put us into green energy or electrical vehicles, which our infrastructure couldn't even support. By the way, the ultimate goal is, you guys may remember hearing of Agenda 21 back in the day. The goal is eventually to move us all into these blue cities, to these metropolitan areas, so that they can control us. Everyone's on mass transportation. Everyone lives life in the city. They think everyone would love that. That would be heaven for them. The Democrats would virtually control everything. And all of us misfits, those of us that like freedom, that live in red states or rural areas or the suburbs, would have to acquiesce to the demands of the radical leftists so that they could control us. So essentially, we would live lives of hell if we continue to live in the suburbs or rural areas, and we would be forced to, or we would desire even to move into these cities where everyone is so densely confined. But now a problem happened. Remember, we had COVID. We had a pandemic hit, and we see that it didn't work out well in blue cities. We also see that crime is rampant in blue cities, so their plan isn't going according to plan. But what they're going to try to do is put their knee on our necks and force the issue. That is exactly what they're doing. Hat tip the Federalist. Germany's green energy disaster is a warning to the U.S. Here's the summary. As gas hit historic highs, leftists keep arguing it's a perfect time to transition to a, quote, clean energy, close quote, economy. Now is a moment. This is Elizabeth Warren. I'm quoting her. Now is a moment to double down, triple down, and quadruple down on clean energy, Pocahontas says, close quote. By the way, I know everyone say Rush coined that term, and I love Rush. He was my favorite. But I got to say, I wrote a column on Pocahontas, I think even before Rush said it. But even if I was thinking like Rush at the time, around the same time, I'm completely honored because that would be freaking amazing. Let's be honest. All right. Now, this is what Elizabeth Warren tweeted on Friday. Again, I'll read that over. She says, now is the moment to double down, triple down, and quadruple down on clean energy. That's exactly what the Biden administration is doing. That's exactly what the Democrat Party is doing. You have to understand that their goal is to crush you. Now, their argument is this is moral. Transitioning to clean energy, quote unquote, is moral. This is a moral argument for them. These people belong in a cult. Now, I don't think they necessarily believe this, at least not all of them. I know that these lefties understand exactly what they're trying to do, including AOC. I don't think she believes it either. I think she's a puppet for George Soros, essentially, and the radical left that pay her. In the piece, we learned that wind, solar, and nuclear have powered about 38%. This is Elizabeth Warren of the State's Power 2021, rivaling natural gas at 42%. That's quite the sleight of hand. This is what the columnist said. David Harsanyi is the one of the Federalist that wrote this. So let me just read this again. In the piece, we learned that wind, solar, and nuclear have, quote, powered about 38% of the state's power in 2021, rivaling natural gas at 42%, close quote. And then the columnist says, David Harsanyi says, that's quite the sleight of hand, tantamount to bragging about how Babe Ruth, 60, Lou Gehrig, 47, and Joe Dugan, 2, combined for 109 home runs in 1927. It's true but deceptive, he says. Here's the truth. Subsidized solar power generates less than 2% of Texas's energy. I'm sorry. She was talking about Texas. I should have. So Elizabeth Warren tweeted on Friday, linking to a CNN piece that contends that, quote, wind and solar have been bailing out Texas during its recent heat wave, which that is a complete and utter lie. I want you guys to go back, look at PragerU, look at the Texas freeze, I believe is what the PragerU video is called, of what happened a year or so ago in Texas when everything went kaput. They were relying on clean energy, right? This intermittent energy of wind and solar, and it didn't work out well for the Texas people. It was an absolute and complete disaster. So, again, subsidized in Texas to combat the lies of Elizabeth Warren. Subsidized solar power generates less than 2% of Texas's energy during the year. Nuclear power generates 10%, wind nearly 20%. Coal accounts for nearly 15% of the power, 15%, and natural gas for more than 15% of the electricity that is generated in Texas. Again, subsidized solar power generates less than 2% of Texas's energy. So Elizabeth Warren was straight up lying when she tried to combine wind, solar, nuclear, 38%. She tries to mix them all together so you think that wind and solar is more impactful than it actually is, but it only accounts for 2% of Texas's energy use, and it was that 2% was a complete and utter failure. All right, that's just the truth. It would be far more accurate, according to the columnist, to say that coal, nuclear, and gas are the ones that are bailing out Texas, and that is true. No nation has anything approaching what they claim is a clean energy economy. It doesn't work. We can look at Germany, and that's exactly what we will do. So those that have proved to, or that have claimed, like Elizabeth Warren, that we can build this clean energy economy, it's simply lying. We have evidence. We have proof that this doesn't work. Spain, and we have Germany. We have these European nations that have tried this nonsense and are now beholden to Putin. This is total crap. There is no such thing as a clean energy economy, at least not one that works. Remember Fukushima. A decade ago, so more than a decade ago, after the major earthquake caused the Fukushima nuclear disaster, then German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced that her nation would close down all its nuclear power plants, at the same time quadrupling down on the decarbonization of its economy. Once there were 17 reactors in Germany, now only 3 remain. Unbelievable. So the move to clean energy without nuclear has accomplished 3 things. And this is it. It has prompted Germany and the rest of the EU to begin relying more heavily on Russia for their natural gas as it transitioned. So Putin, who has begun demanding EU nations pay for their energy in rubles, is now able to undercut the European economy at will. And he's done just that because he's got them by the you-know-what. And then 2, it has created the highest global electricity prices per household in the world. Now, guys, look at the inflation and how it is impacting us. Inflation, the high costs of gas and energy inside of the United States, along with the food shortages. It's getting harder and harder if you're the average everyday American to survive. Only the elite seems like will survive this economy. But now, what about your electric bill? This is what they experience. This is what they experience in Germany after going to clean energy under the horrible leader Angela Merkel that she was. It has created, again, they have the highest global electricity prices per household in the world in Germany. In 2019, German households were paying 34 cents per kilowatt hour compared to the United States. What do we pay? 13 cents. So if you think your electric bill is high now, just wait until Joe Biden and the Democrats move us to quote unquote clean energy. It's not worth it, guys. It is not worth it. The price of energy has doubled since 2000 when Germany first mandated decarbonization, an effort that forced energy companies again to purchase long-term inefficient renewables at high fabricated prices. Right? So in order to transition away from natural fuels, these companies had to pay a high price. They had to go along to get along, and it isn't working out well. 3, this is also what has happened in Germany with the move to clean energy. It has meant the burning of coal. Exactly what these fools say they want to get away from. Even before Russia began cutting off supply, Germany was more reliant on coal than the U.S. This week, Germany's economy minister, Robert Habeck, who earlier this year rejected a European Union label of nuclear energy as quote unquote green, announced that in an effort to avoid future gas shortages, because cars can't run on wind, the economy minister of Germany, Robert Habeck, said the government would incentivize the use of more coal-fired power plants. So if they want to get away from depending on Russia, right? They got to fire up those coal-fired power plants. Isn't that amazing? So the transition to green that Germany began 30 years ago has not worked at all. In 2000, Germany obtained 84% of its energy from fossil fuels. I want you to pay attention to this, right? Because this is in the span of about 20 years. I want you to see how far it's gone. This nonsense, even though these people completely committed to transitioning to clean energy, I want you to notice how slow the progress has come. So the transition to green that Germany began 30 years ago hasn't worked. In 2000, Germany obtained 84% of its energy from fossil fuels. All right. That's a large percentage, right, from fossil fuels. By 2019, it was 78%. So still 2 years later, despite forcing companies to go green and clean energy and all this kind of nonsense, only 6%, they used 6% less fossil fuels, the entire country. As Vaclav Smil pointed out a couple of years ago, at this rate, Germany would still be deriving 70% of its energy from fossil fuels all the way up to 2050. So this transition is suicide, and it doesn't work. You can't run a clean energy economy. And Germany's problems that they are experiencing now are self-inflicted. And the United States is going down the path of doing the same. And I got to tell you, I know the left wants to make this transition, but what about those feckless Republicans that don't seem to be speaking up on this issue? Now, since we know that this idea of moving to a clean energy economy doesn't work, let's talk about the morality, if you will, of EVs. Let's talk about, let's just get into that. Hat tip, site.Other. Is it ethical to purchase a lithium battery-powered EV? Now, I'm going to ask you the question again. How many child slaves does it take to build an EV? Guys, before I go on, just remember, please share this podcast. This stuff is important. This is where the left is trying to take us. So, everywhere you can subscribe, thecarljacksonshow.com, salempodcastnetwork.com, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, like, share, rate, review, Please, because what I want to do, along with your help, is destroy the arguments of the left as they try to undermine our Constitution, as they try to destroy America with their lies. I want to provide you the evidence and the proof that they are lying and that it is their intent to destroy America. Oh, and I forgot to say this. For those of you that are interested in real solutions to the Uvalde mass school shooting, go back and check out my podcast with John Lott. This guy is the best researcher, or amongst the best researcher in the world when it comes to criminals using guns, mass shootings, so on, etc. So check out my podcast with John Lott. All right, now getting back to this. Is it ethical to purchase a lithium battery powered by EV? With numerous state governors having issued executive orders to phase out the purchasing of gasoline-driven cars within the next decade or so, and the automobile manufacturers' efforts to phase into only manufacturing EVs, here's some food for thought about the lack of transparency about, quote, clean energy exploitations, close quote, that this gentleman who wrote this article by the name of Ronald Stein co-authored. First off, here's what you need to know. Oil wells pump out 100%. Listen to me. For those of you that are into healthy eating, okay, you'll know this word. You'll recognize this word. So oil wells pump out 100% organic material from the ground. So for those, I mean, just on a common sense basis, I know we're talking apples to oranges. I get it when it comes to food and when it comes to, but we're not necessarily. Because think about the minerals that we need, natural minerals that we need in order to grow food. So it's not necessarily apples to oranges, but everything coming out of the ground is natural. It is organic compared to man-made components. Just on a common sense level, let that marinate for just a second. All right. Now, so first, we pump out 100% organic material from the ground when it comes to fossil fuels. Then what happens? Well, then it flows to pipelines, safely transporting the oil to refineries to be manufactured into usable oil derivatives that are the basis of more than, listen to this, 6,000 products for society. I challenge you to go online and do a Google search or a DuckDuck search, whatever, DuckDuckGo it, a search on how many items are used on a daily basis that are derived from fossil fuels. I guarantee you, when you look, I don't care how healthy you are, I don't care how anti-fossil fuel you are, if you were to totally abandon everything made by fossil fuels, you would be homeless and walking around butt naked. It is that severe. They're talking about a total shutdown of life. Now, these elitists they would still use products made by fossil fuels because they really understand the truth. This is about control. They can't get rid of fossil fuels. But what they can do is crush us and make us subject to their whims to transition to clean energy, all the while knowing, I believe they know that it isn't clean, but it is about control. They won't get rid of the stuff they're using made of fossil fuels. They wouldn't know how to survive. Absolutely amazing. So we transport this stuff, 6,000 products. We transport it cleanly. I understand there's oil spills here and there, but still, even that is going to be nothing compared to the damage that EVs do to the environment, not to mention the child slave labor involved in developing these batteries. And I'll get to that in just a second. So we have about 6,000 products used for society that oil produces, petroleum-based oil produces. And then we go into transportation fuels needed by the world's heavyweight and long-range infrastructures of aviation, merchant ship, cruise ships, militaries. So this is why we need these natural fossil fuels. It fuels our economy. It fuels our way of life. Do you want to stop flying? Do you want products to stop being shipped by merchant ships? Do you want to stop cruising? For those of you that enjoy cruise ships, what about a military? Are we going to be able to defend ourselves against people like Russia and China? Because we're going to need fossil fuels in order to make this work. We have idiots now, and then the Department of Defense I mean, we're trying to go electric in the Department of Defense. You know how unreliable those things are going to be on the battleground against people with brains that operate in the Russian military and the Chinese military. You know how stupid that is to be able to. What are we going to do? Have tanks in the middle of the battlefield? And oh, wait a minute, wait a second, we got to charge this thing. What the hell are we thinking? These guys are nuts that are running the United States of America. We got to get rid of these. All right, so now oil wells pump out 100% organic material. Now let's go to lithium. Lithium mines in entire mountains are destroyed with diesel gas guzzling bulldozers. So in order to get these lithium batteries that are required for these electrical vehicles or EVs, right? We have to mine entire mountains. You guys go online, check out the pictures. It's absolutely disgusting. So those people that claim they want to save the environment by transitioning to clean energy, first off, there's no such thing. The cleanest is to stick with fossil fuels and to refine it and dig for it in ways such as fracking that we have to make the process even cleaner. You guys are being totally duped. I don't care if you want an EV just for the sake of driving a car that's faster, or perhaps you just don't want to use gasoline or fossil fuels. I get it. But don't dare say or lie to yourself and say these things are cleaner for the environment. They're not. And they're complicit in child slave labor as well, which, again, I will get to. So listen to this. Each mine, when they're mining for EV batteries, right? Each mine usually consists of 35 to 40 humongous 797 Caterpillar haul trucks. Along with, you guys got to look at these things. These trucks are so massive, they look like they're the size of freaking jets. It's unbelievable. So each mine, again, consists of 35 to 40 humongous 797 Caterpillar haul trucks, along with hundreds of other large equipment, bulldozers, or what have you. Each 797, listen to this, uses 500,000 gallons of diesel fuel a year. So again, we're talking about 35 to 40. This is for one mine for electrical vehicles. So we're talking about 35 to 40 of these gas guzzling 797 Caterpillar haulers, which really look cool. But if you're concerned about the environment, in order to get the material needed for these electrical vehicles, you're talking about 500,000 gallons of diesel fuel per the 35 to 40 Caterpillar. So per Caterpillar, all right? 500,000 gallons of diesel per Caterpillar to mine for electrical vehicles. And you're not going to be able to do it with an electrical. You're not going to be able to pull that type of weight and do that type of work with electrical bulldozers. It's not going to happen. We're just being duped. This is nonsense. This stuff is complete and utter nonsense. So with an inventory of just 35, the haul trucks alone are using 17.5 million gallons of fuel a year for just one lithium site. One lithium site, 17.5 million gallons of diesel fuel per year. One lithium site. One. Unbelievable. All right, so environmentalists conveniently ignore the environment and humanitarian abuses, which is what I want to get into, that are occurring in developing countries with people with darker skin. You know, the people that they claim they don't want to oppress. This is exactly what's happening. The columnist goes on to say both human rights abuses and environmental degradation are directly connected to the mining for the exotic minerals and metals that are required to manufacture these wind turbines, solar panels, and EV batteries. Guys, what do you think these solar panels are made of? Seriously, what do you think wind turbines are made of? The EV batteries, we're going to go into it. So what's in EV batteries? Well, here's a typical EV battery. An EV battery weighs, a typical one does, 1,000 pounds. It contains 25 pounds of lithium, 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese. You can also use manganese for fertilizing your palm trees if you guys love palm trees. 30 pounds of cobalt, 200 pounds of copper, and 400 pounds of aluminum, steel, and plastic. You're saying this is better than fossil fuels? Inside are over 6,000 individual lithium-ion cells inside of an EV battery. All of the aforementioned components come from mining. So we've already talked about how in order for, in order to mine one lithium mining escapade, if you will, we got to use about 17 million gallons of diesel fuel to do so. They do in their bulldozers. Absolutely insane. All right, so listen to this. It should concern you that all of these toxic components come from mining. For instance, to manufacture each EV auto battery, you must process 25,000 pounds of brine for the lithium, 30,000 pounds of ore for the cobalt, 5,000 pounds of ore for the nickel, and 25,000 pounds of ore for copper. All told, you dig up 500,000 pounds of the Earth's crust for just one battery. 500,000 pounds of the Earth's crust for one 1,000-pound battery. And these fools want to say that they're advocates for clean energy. Now, this is about control, guys. Fossil fuels are much better for the environment. And also, child slavery is not required. It's not required. So in developing countries, these mining operations exploit child labor. Children as young as 10, I've read 10 to 13, some even younger, are responsible for the most egregious human rights violations of vulnerable minority populations. Again, these people claim to care about the black, brown, yellow children of the world. They say that crap all the time. They don't care. They don't even know what's happening. All they know is what the left is feeding them and what they learn in academia, what they learn on Twitter, what they learn by watching CNN, MSNBC, or any one of these. Listen, you flip on the TV, you're being brainwashed every single day by some of these people, these leftists that seem to run most of our major institutions, including media. So these people think they're really moral by wanting this clean energy economy. They're going to make us all broke, and they're going to make the country, or they're going to make the environment dirtier. That's all they're doing. So again, these people practice human rights violations all the time when it comes to their child labor abuse. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know exactly how many child slaves it takes to build an EV. We have no idea, because the industry is completely, it isn't transparent. They don't want us to know what's going on. I'm sorry, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. I like the guy, but I don't like Teslas. I think they're cool. I think they look kind of cool. Some of them look really ugly to me. I'm just not just not my thing. All right. I understand some of you love them. No problem whatsoever. But there's an issue here. They're not doing anything to clean the environment. So if you want to, if you like them because they're fast and they're cool, you like the aerodynamics, you like how fast they can go, you like the look. Hey, by all means, get a Tesla or any EV you want. But don't sit here and virtue signal. Don't sit here and pretend as if you're doing something good for the environment. You're not. You're destroying the environment, as a matter of fact, in order to virtue signal. You're doing the complete opposite of what you believe you're doing. So not only in order to mine for these things, mine for the components needed, the material needed for these EVs, not only are you essentially destroying mountains in developing nations, nations that want to become as prosperous as the United States, but probably won't, because we're telling them, hey, don't use fossil fuels, even though we use fossil fuels to become the most powerful nation in the world. We're saying, hey, don't do that there. What a bunch of hypocrites we've become. What a bunch of hypocrites we've become. So here's what cult members should know, EV cult members should know, is needed to make the EV technology work for billions of lightweight cars. There's a couple of things. Get the mining practices, because this isn't going to fly in the United States. If this industry was transparent to Americans, it wouldn't fly in the United States. So here's what you cult followers in America need to know. All right. So get in the mining practices for these exotic minerals, according to the colonists, and metals, to the point that they are acceptable to the environmental movement, and stop the environmental degradation and humanity atrocities occurring in developing countries where people are being exploited with yellow, brown, and black skin. Basically, here's what he says: how many environmentalists are going to support lithium mines if they knew this in America, if they knew this? So if they knew what it would take, if the industry was transparent, and how they are destroying mountains and using child slave labor, how many people do you think would still buy into this clean, this clean energy nonsense? I dare to say not many at all. Further, he says, basically, if these environmentalists knew this, the second thing, further development of battery technology to somewhat clone how phones have been reduced in size with smaller and smaller batteries and increased capabilities in those small phones and reduce the alarming tendency of lithium batteries and their charging sources from spontaneously catching fire without warning. This is another thing. This is a big issue. When it comes to these electrical batteries, you can even go online where they have made smaller batteries, and you can see where radio control cars, little scooters that you stand on, they that don't perform as well, that end up catching on fire. It's totally insane. And then again, you can watch these EV fires online. So the next time you're tempted to virtue signal because you have an EV or because you want an EV, or you're arguing that, hey, listen, we need to develop more clean energy. We need to go to these intermittent wind, solar, so on, etc. It's just complete. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself. And by the way, EVs don't make electricity. Let me read this. We should all know that an electric vehicle battery does not make electricity. It only stores electricity produced somewhere else, right? Primarily by coal, uranium, natural gas power plants, and occasionally by intermittent breezes and sunshine. So, for some of this stuff, you got to pray for good weather. If you live in the north, you're screwed. You're screwed if you have an EV. The thing isn't going to work well in colder weather. It just isn't. It's amazing. So you're going to have to make sure that you have a snowmobile or a gas guzzler to make it in the cool season. So he goes on to say, so to say an EV is a zero emission vehicle isn't valid at all, as 80% of the electricity generated to charge the batteries is from coal. Let me read that again. 80% of the electricity generated to charge the battery is from coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Since 20% of the electricity generated in the U.S. is from coal-fired plants, it follows that 20% of the EVs on the road are coal-powered. All right? 40% of the electricity generated in the U.S. is from natural gas. So that means EVs on the road are natural gas powered by 40%. Since 20% of the electricity that is generated in the U.S. from nuclear, it follows that 20% of the EVs on the road are nuclear powered. You see what's happening here? This is all about control. Life without oil is not as simple as people may think. Again, we talked about 6,000 products, at least, that are made from fossil fuels, as renewable energy is only intermittent electricity from breezes and sunshine, as neither wind turbines nor solar panels can manufacture anything for society. Climate change, he says, may impact humanity, but being mandated to live without the products manufactured from oil will necessitate lifestyles being mandated back to the horse and buggy of the 1800s and could be the greatest threat to civilization's 8 billion residents. For all of you guys in Antifa and BLM, George Soros' brown shirts, can you imagine if you had to get place to place to terrorize people on horse and buggy? Could you imagine that? Consider this ESG movement, complete and utter lie. This is why it's all about control. This the environmental, social, and governance boards, and these ESG scores that you have to have popping up in some banks. Try your best to get away from those things. It's all a fraud. These people claim to be the moralists, and they're the complete opposite. They're liars. They're liars. So be aware that purchasing an EV is going to require some slave labor from children. Be aware that your car or your electric battery may catch fire. Be aware that in order to drive an EV, you're actually doing much more damage to the environment than if you were to just drive a fossil fuel or a car with an internal combustion engine. This is all about control. And the Biden administration are not going to relent because they want us to move to EVs because they know they're unsustainable. They know this, guys. Don't let them lie to you. They know this stuff. They know EVs are unsustainable. The goal is to get us from EVs into public transportation, into blue cities where they can control us. Fortunately for us, even though we didn't like it at the time, the pandemic occurred. Crime is rising in these blue cities, causing an exodus. So as more Americans experience what the left has to offer, this stuff isn't necessarily working. So they're going to double down, they're going to triple down, and they're going to try to force us to go to quote unquote clean energy, which again is not clean at all and supports a dirty environment, destroying mountains and developing nations, and child slave labor. How many child slave laborers are there out there developing or helping to develop these EVs? I don't know, but they're not being transparent. So it's definitely more than I suspect any of us would like to know. Guys, until next time, don't go where you're doing good. God bless you. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast everywhere podcasts are found. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Go to thecarljacksonshow.com. Also, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, all of that good stuff. I appreciate you guys. Follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show, wherever I am on social media. Again, God bless you. And until next time, don't grow where you're doing good. Love you guys.